Star Trek has flair. You get green girls, so how much does it take to get some green paint on you and a fluffy costume and run around and be chased by eager people to get their hands on some green? Well, the whole experience has gone from my mind. When you say, I've heard many times that I did Howdy Doody, but the whole experience is wiped out of my head. So if I were on a stand with my hand on the Bible, I'd say, well, no, I've never done Howdy Doody, but apparently I did. So how did I prepare? By not recollecting anything. But that was in Canada, and I think it was in Canada, isn't that the way it says? I must have been striving to survive as a young actor. In Canada, at that time, in Toronto, which was the center of broadcasting in Canada, was like our New York, there were 15 actors who made a living acting, and I became one of them by doing Howdy Doody and the religious shows that on Sunday where you were the apostles. I could never be Jesus because I couldn't get the voice quite right. But I could be James or Peter, or Paul. Anyway, it was a matter of survival, and so Howdy Doody must have been my survival mode. The cameras in the early days were gigantic, 3 feet high and maybe 4 feet long, lenses that big, and a guy behind it, and it's on rollers, and he's pushing this thing around, and the tubes which they were using then were so hot they needed fans to blow away the hot air to keep them cool. So this animal would move around somewhat stealthily and make little cooing sounds like whoo. So you'd stand beside it, it was warm, and it was going whoo. And then this red light would come on, and then if you were standing in front of it, as taking your picture, it would advance on you very slowly. Animals can be menacing. The head lowers and it begins to come forward, and you realize you're in deep trouble if the dog or a bear is coming at you like that. But the camera has got his lens up, and there's a guy behind it with his ears on, ears pricked forward. There's nothing intimidating about the camera coming towards you. And finally it ends about like this, and you're in close-up. So you're looking past it in close-up, and this thing is right in your face. But it's like a loved one saying, "Oh, Billy, how nice you look today." And so it's a loving, friendly, or it's an animal about to destroy you. Any show you're watching, turn off the sound and watch the actors and look at their eyes and look at their inadvertent gestures and their blink rate and all. And they're either lying or they're telling the truth. And you see people in commercials who are going, and now and you know that they don't know what they're talking about. Or actors who are so premeditated that they're doing a learned thing. Well, it may be the 12th take too. I mean, it takes technique to keep the spontaneity up when it isn't spontaneous. I mean, there's so much involved. But no, you can't lie. You can't lie to that camera. It's like you, and we're limited to our 50 millimeter lens eyes. But if you put on that 150 millimeter lens and you're here, like I try to get in Raw Nerve, I try to get as close as possible without violating the space, but right on the edge of that envelope to get there, to be intimate. You can't lie. Nobody can lie. I would have thought, if you were in isolation and they showed you this half-hour film, you'd have laughed yourself sick about this little animal on top of this non-aerodynamic animal on top of a wing, and appearing and reappearing. You would have laughed. But strangely, it seems to have touched a nerve which, in its latest iteration, would be the latest airplane that's gone down, and you think, it mysteriously went down in a snowstorm, and why, and we weren't meant to fly, and that nerve of what is this box doing up in the air? And maybe there are little gremlins that, so it touches a universal fear, I think. There was a crazy guy, the guy who played crazies. There was a character actor, well-known character actor, and whose name I don't remember because I probably never knew it. But if you saw his face, you'd know. You know who I meant. And he's got crazy eyes. He's big guy with crazy eyes. And he's got crazy eyes because he's crazy. So he would act crazy. I mean, he'd perform crazy, and then he would act crazy. And I was standing in front of him in one scene when I felt as, and he hadn't done this in The Master, but in my close-up, I think it was my close-up or two shot, he grabbed a hold of my throat and started to throttle me. Like he was standing behind me, and I'm supposed to be the hero or something. So I don't want to succumb or turn around and say, stop that. You know, I mean, that isn't heroic. So I think some of my judo training came in handy, and I don't remember, but I would like to think that I stomped on his foot and I hit him with my elbow, grabbed him by the neck, and did a series of non-technical, hysterical moves that usually work in film but rarely do in real life. There is a psychological philosophy, treatise, theory, that if you assume a frightened pose, if you go, oh, then that generates fear. So you can go, oh, and feel fear, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Or you can feel fear, and then because of that, the genetics kick in, and fear has traditional physicality about it. So some actors go one way and some actors go another way. It's always been the gossip that mostly the English actors have technique and the American actors have emotion. I don't really subscribe to that, but it's sort of is fun to say that. The instinctive stand-up comic who has had little, if any, training as an actor now just wants to go with the flow. He doesn't want to rehearse. He wants to do it in one take, or else every other take becomes less. Bert Lahr, who played the Cowardly Lion in Over the Rainbow, The Wizard of Oz, was selected to do a Molière comedy. Sidney Lumet was directing, and I was in the cast. Bert Lahr came to the first rehearsal, Lion perfect, okay? He was word perfect. And all of us were reading, and he didn't read. He had it with flair. Molière has a flair. There's a technique. There's a way of saying it that you can't do Cowardly Lion in Molière, although you can. That's a mistake. You can, but not that character, or maybe that character. I don't know. Second rehearsal, next day, he missed one word. Third rehearsal, he missed 5 words, and slowly went downhill to when we got on the air and everybody else was now playing Molière. He went up several times and lost his words. That was total instinct of a burlesque comic not having the technique of the trained actor. So it depends what you're doing and when you're doing it and how you're doing it. On film, mostly, that instinctive thing works best, where you're yourself, you're nobody else, you're not playing a character, You're playing yourself, and what comes out is what the camera sees. When you're this close, you can't falsify. The director is so hassled in television that they bring the camera here, quick, bring the camera, and okay, when we roll, when you're ready, because he's behind, because his job depends on bringing it in on time, and the producer is torn between the two. So the only one who's validating the character mostly is the actor. So yeah, it's in my opinion requisite to make a fuss up to a certain point about retaining the characteristics of the character. And I say up to a point because political budgets, you come to the cliff, which is we got to shoot it now or else we'll never get it, and then that's the sine qua non. That's it's all over there, and you got to do something. Star Trek had made a pilot with another actor as the captain, and NBC didn't buy the pilot, make it a series. But they said to Roddenberry, it's a very interesting premise, let's do another pilot. I'd never heard of that before or since. But you have to recast it. So eventually they came to me and they said, we want to show you this pilot and we want you to play the captain. So I saw the pilot, and the mistake they made, I felt, was that, the captain sat there and said, turn left, or starboard, or fire the guns, as though it were momentous. Whereas it becomes more fun if it's immediate. Oh my God, let's get out of here. Turn left. And the word fun also should be there. Guys who are on a long voyage like that, there's a camaraderie. There's less of the formality of the Navy, I would think. Eventually, you get to know how the guy sits on a toilet or whatever. Get too familiar. So I was aiming for that familiarity, yet distance, the loneliness of command, and the fun of it. And I suggested that, and they sort of bought it, and the second pilot became a lighter vehicle. Gene Coon was an extraordinary guy, and much he's been missed. He's been lost to some degree as to the people who are responsible for the success of the 3 years that I was in it. And Gene Coon was a military guy who was also a writer. Strange combination. I once met a guy who was a policeman who wrote, and there were a couple of those. And they're wonderful combinations because they know, the military guys and the policemen know the procedure. And then there's all these stories that abound, these human stories that are told in a laconic fashion because these guys don't have long speeches. They're men of action. And that's what Gene Coon fashioned in a year of his tour of duty on Star Trek. Gene wasn't originally particularly interested in science fiction. It was, I imagine everybody who is got some interest in that area looks to science fiction as a sort of interesting expansion of the imagination, because you're required to put the context in a place that doesn't exist. So it exists in your imagination, and to the writer's ability to, either in literature, to make the mind work, or in film to evoke the special effects guy, the sets, everybody else who contributes to a science fiction film and their imagination. It's that writer's original imagination of the science fiction context that that is the challenge. And so when Gene thought of Star Trek, I imagine he took it as a vehicle. He referred to it every so often as this pilgrims, the people going out west in a wagon train to the west. This was a wagon train into space, and fulfilling all those human stories. Oh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun to do, and all this gobbledygook that we had to learn, that was difficult. What isn't fun on a series is the isolation, the eventual isolation of just you and the people struggling to get through it, which is what it is. It's a war, and your comrades in war are the cast and crew and production people. The hours are so demanding that you're in isolation, and eventually relationships in the outside world cascade. They're eventually broken to a large degree. Not everybody, but mostly.
Because of the time?
It's time. You don't have any time. When you do have time off, you're so exhausted you go to sleep. Well, he was handsome and athletic and smart and a leader and intelligent and funny, and had lots of women trailing him, and men loved him, and it was sort of me.
Do you think?
But I certainly knew that when I walked in an airport or out in the public, that this Captain Kirk thing was happening a lot. Mostly I found it an embarrassment. I kind of, oh God. And I would sort of hide and duck, and never quite accepted the way it pulls you out of anonymity.
Sounds hard. I mean, it sounds like...
It is. You know, people will say, well, I like to be cursed with that difficulty, and that's true. I never forget that either. But being singled out all the time is, to me, is embarrassing. I've either got a low-level sense of embarrassment, or it really is high. I mean, yesterday I'm in a crowded cheese store. All I want to do is buy some cheese, you know. And then take my picture, get the thing, sign the. Oh God! Just let me come in and taste some cheese, will you? My God, 3 years, 40 years ago, they still talk about the character. My God, you know, and they're trying to find a young guy in a movie that's coming up. It's great. It's unbelievable, and I don't know what they're talking about. That's the other part of it. You were suggesting that maybe there's a consciousness about it. I don't have any conscience. I'm just trying to do the best I can, give you a good interview, talk about stories that are interesting to me, and I don't have any calculation about them. Frequently, I've been at one with the part, and in front of an audience, something magical can happen, whether the audience is the camera or the audience is out there. I feel like rays, or there's emanations that are going back and forth, lines of communication that are going back and forth, that I'm reaching out to that audience that's listening to me and saying, I'm trying to communicate something that is really interesting. Listen to what I'm saying, whether I've said it or whether it's been written for me to say. And I feel this at my best. I'm at this, and in conversation as well, with raw nerve. There are times when the person and myself are like unified, and you can see it on camera. Well, there's this beautiful dark-skinned girl. I mean, she's beautiful. She's beautiful now, but she, you know, as a young lady, she had the beauty of youth. So it wasn't very hard to work up enthusiasm to kiss her. Then the characters in the plot were being manipulated by a very strong mind of the villain and being commanded to kiss. So how much of an interracial incident was this? You know, I can't, I won't, I did, okay. It lacked the drama of, oh my God, a white guy's kissing a black girl on camera, wow. To me, it lacked that. It wasn't like your own volition. So
I think the one thing about that I found most striking is that there's all this concern that everyone in the South is going to, turn off NBC forever, and yet the only reaction. Do you remember the one letter from the one guy who said, "Hey, if Kirk's going to kiss a good-looking woman, all for it"? I mean, there was no reaction.
right if I remember correctly, I think one station in the South perfunctorily didn't play that hour, but we have had our revenge because it was in the South too. I remember shooting something down south, and I was on the cusp of two competing exhibitors in whatever it was, cable or whatever you call the broadcasting, so that you could tune in to Star Trek like 6 hours a day, because you were getting it from here and getting it from there, and they were playing it all the time anyway. So that interracial kiss must have played again and again and again. So they may have cut it out once, but we fooled them. My standard answer to that used to be, well, I thought it was me. And then I learned to my absolute astonishment that it wasn't. So then you go through all the other reasons. The science fiction story, the philosophy, the cast, the action, the philosophy, the time slot, the advertisers, and then finally I come up with the only answer that makes any sense to me, and that is, even then, 40 years ago, Rachel Carlson had written a book called The Silent Spring, and it was the beginning of questioning of the planet's ability to sustain itself, human life. Lots of other life will remain. So, the human race is in question right now. As much as we try to blindfold ourselves and deny it and put on colored glasses, the fact is that within 100 years, as short a period of time as that, it could mean the end of human life. And then the earth will cleanse itself and another species will be the top, whatever you call it, the top species, the alpha species. But Star Trek posits that in 300 or 400 years, life will be wonderful. The technology which has dug us into this, larger than a mess, into this cataclysmic possibility, will get us out of it, which is a strange sort of human characteristic, that the very thing that's killing you is going to make you better, but that's another story. And that hope, that positiveness, that life exists and that goodness will out and right will prevail and heaven exists, all the positive aspects that we look to as we look around us at the ruination around us, that we seek to be uplifted by a variety of things, religion being one of them, and Star Trek being another. Well, there are people more passionate in previous years, but still some people out there who found what I just described as something they could hold on to and became very passionate about those ideas, and thusly about us actors and the whole milieu of Star Trek. But there's another aspect to that I discovered. I would go to these conventions and talk a little bit and tell them what I was doing and what I was thinking, or they would ask questions, and I'd try and amuse them for an hour or so at these conventions. I don't do them anymore. But I wrote a book called Get a Life, in which I had gone around and did a lot of interviews of people who went to the conventions, trying to find out why they went to the convention. And once again, I was astonished and humiliated. I thought they were coming to see the actors, and they weren't. They were coming to see each other. They were going to conventions to meet and have fun with each other, and the interplay with each other. We were an amusing sidebar, but the convention would have been just as good and just as successful that the actors coming to play their little part on the stage. And I realized that was the nature of that particular convention, maybe a lot of conventions. Maybe guys who, whatever business you're in, and you have a convention, go there not to hear the speeches and we're going to do better this year, and we've got this professor talking to us about how to improve, but to see each other and to have fun and interact and run around the hotel rooms and hallways. And that's what I discovered, the great conventions. The people had a great time together. Star Trek has flair. You get green girls, so how much does it take to get some green paint on you and a fluffy costume and run around and be chased by eager people to get their hands on some green? And then there was even another thing. I'm recalling now elements of the book that I wrote. There were some people who had a command imperative. They were like Hitler's bodyguards. They were almost SS. And they would give orders to people, and they were like commanders, and they thought of themselves, they put on the uniform that they made or had made, and they became, autocratic. And they had fun doing that. And I remember a story about this kid bringing his cat to the convention, dressing the cat up in a costume because he was lonely, and this cat was his company, and and he became known as the cat guy, and that was his area of fame, and he lived for it. So I mean, why not? Everybody is living their life as best they can, and this was one way. Well, there's no magical secret, and this word reinvent is like a new term that I heard in the last while, but I don't understand it. It's what we do is we say words that somebody else has written. We try to bring a life to it that either the writer has in there or that the writer has referred to, and depending on the actor, to flesh it out. And I bring, as every actor does, my own persona in the same way that in science fiction you can't imagine, you can't write about, you can't detail something you can't imagine. I'm going to try and take this a little further afield and try and come back to the original thought. I'm reading up on animal emotions. I'm doing background on what animals feel. And a very salient thing was said, that animals feel very much the way we feel, but they may be feeling something else. But we can't imagine what it is they're feeling because we feel what we feel, and we're anthropomorphizing their emotions, which has validity because we're stemming from the same mammalian brain. So far, so good? So that an actor can only portray what is inside him. You may do something, you will do something differently than I would reading the same lines because of the context of our lives. So I bring to each role what I am and try and emphasize part of me that seems to dovetail with that of the character, but I can't go beyond me because I don't know anything else but me. So whatever it is that's happening, I'm not reinventing myself. I'm being an actor. I've got the reins like a horse. Got a double bridle. I've got the neck up and the chin down. I've got the pressure up. The animal's animated. I'm between his ears. I'm riding him, pushing him forward with my body, and I'm adjusting all the time. The horse wants to go this way, and I say, no, go this way. The part is saying, do this, do that. Okay, but maybe we can do this. And it's like riding a wild horse, staying in control, and yet letting the wildness be. The story ideas are not difficult. You take them from the headlines. But the television form of all these curtains, 8, 9, whatever it is now, that's difficult. So you need a story that has some forward movement. You need to take your regular characters who have specific characteristics, as we were talking about earlier, and meld that with the guest of the week who are brought in generally, but not always, to spice up the situation, and put that all together in 9 acts, 7 acts. It's a very technical form that very few people master, and fewer people tell a great story while being forced into this, into these technical necessities. So there are very few good television writers. In addition to that, if a guy is any good, he's got his own series. He's been pulled away from being an independent writer and been made a producer as well as a writer for his own series. So the cream of the crop is usually taken off and put under contract by studios. So it's difficult. Well, there was Rescue 911,
That's right. Yes,
which went on for 6 years. People don't recall that too well. I don't know why. It was one of the first. It may have been the first of the reality shows, but that was a wonderful show, wonderfully produced by Arnold Shapiro, and it saved a lot of lives, and it did a lot of. It was wonderfully complimentary to the emergency medical people. It showed them in a really good light because we found that if you show the death of people, that was a downer and people didn't want to see that. So you only showed the 20% success rate. I think it was then, I don't know it is now. But it was wonderfully popular and was on the airways for quite a while.